Okay, so we're coming to you live with a broadcast with WSA's very own David Gallup, and so pretty excited for this conversation here. David, if you don't mind, give us a little bit of background about your what led you to world citizenship and what you do there at the WSA.
Sure. Well, I came to Washington, D.C. in the late 1980s for law school, and during law school I studied when you had the choice to study to which kind of classes you wanted to choose, other than the original classes that they make you take during the first about year and a half of law school, which are required for everyone. I started taking human rights and law, international law type classes, so my focus was really more global already in law school. And I was also working on a master's in international relations, so studying peace paradigms and obviously wanting to see humanity move beyond the nation-state system already. I'd written a paper where I talked about some kind of united world organization. And so I also worked at a human rights clinic at the law school and represented refugees in asylum cases, as well as helped the students in the clinic as the dean's fellow for the professor who was running the clinic understand what they needed to do throughout the year in that particular clinic. So it was hands-on work, and I was excited about that. So after law school, I was looking for a job in international law and human rights, and came across a World Service Authority, and they were looking for an attorney because although they had a big population of people around the world they were trying to serve, they didn't yet have a legal department. They had a judicial branch, but that was headed by, and still is actually by, an attorney in Illinois. But he, because he wasn't here in our offices in Washington, in our headquarters, they needed somebody here who could help to devise strategies to answer all the letters and deal with all the issues that come up for world citizens, whether it's because the person happens to be stateless, whether the person happens to be a refugee, whether the person happens to simply want to claim their rights beyond the nation state and wanted to know what their rights are and how to do that. So we needed a legal department here, and I had applied, and because I found out from the position from a friend, I was able to get in my application and my resume, cover letter, writing sample, and all prior to the job actually being publicized to the public. So I interviewed with the previous president, I interviewed with the founder, and I started work. I interviewed with the president on a Friday, the founder on a Sunday, and started work that next Monday. Hopped on Gary Davis, the founder's motorcycle, and he took me around town, meeting people in town who we wanted to say, hell, here's my new lawyer. One of the first people we met was a man named Rufus King, who was a high-powered attorney here in Washington and was a good friend of Gary from way back in 1948 when Gary was renouncing his U.S. citizenship and becoming world famous. Rufus was his sort of right-hand attorney in a sense, and supported him in the work that he was doing. So we met Rufus. We went to the Brazilian embassy so Gary could get a visa in his world passport to go to the Earth Summit, the one from 20 years ago. And so it was an exciting first couple days there. And then Gary went back up to Burlington, Vermont, where we have our publications office, and so at that point we had sort of a long-distance work relationship where he would contact me by phone or early stages of email, even really pre-internet back in 1992, through CompuServe, and we would email back and forth, and because we had an entirely Macintosh system, he was able to see my computer hard drive and desktop, and I was able to see his, and we were able to exchange things, which was pretty amazing for 1992. Cool. Actually, even with like a 1200 baud modem or even less. Anyway, so I started working here. My job really over the first couple months was to create WSA's legal department. It didn't have a legal department, so I had to, by seeing what previous people on staff had done, like the office manager and others, to sort of work into a legal framework, the strategies and the procedures that we would need to have a fully functioning legal department. And so came up with an office manual, came up with a first-year plan, a 5-year plan, a 10-year plan, etc., of what we would be doing. Then, as I went into the organization further, stayed here longer, I felt that it was important as the lawyer for the organization that I knew about everything, because I was appointed as a general counsel, which is really a lawyer for an organization. Like if you're a general counsel of a corporation, you're there to protect the corporation. That's actually not how I saw my role. I saw my role not just as protecting the organization, but protecting the global public, because in a sense, actually, the organization is the public. It's both. It's one and the same, really. We are here to help the public. We're here to present the public with information to help them claim their rights, etc. But so it's both roles, really. And I would say probably 90% of the time, or even more, maybe 97% of the time, I'm working to help the public in the sense of general counsel for the world, for human beings, and maybe only 2 or 3% in representing the organization. So anyway, we needed strategies and programs that were formalized, so that because we would get a barrage of letters all the time from people, whether it was because they had difficulty in using their world passport and exercising their rights, or whether it was simply because, like I said, they were in a refugee situation. They didn't even need or want necessarily the world passport, but they needed our help. And we help people whether they have WSA documents or not. It doesn't matter. If you're having some kind of human rights violation situation and you're falling through the cracks in this system or non-system, international system, because it's really a non-system, it's not really functioning, then people come to us. People come to World Service Authority.
That was my next question, actually, is that what is the role of the WSA, and how does it help either stateless and world citizens? I think you did cover quite a lot of that. What I'd like to discuss also is the anyone interested in becoming a world citizen. What would be your take on it? I talk about it quite a lot on my channel, and sure. I hope that that I give enough information that way people can make a rational decision as to the direction that they should go. So what would you say about world citizenship, and what rights and responsibilities that the individual has, and then what's the WSA role? What's the WSA's role in that? I think you did cover a little bit of it, but if you don't mind, elaborate on it.
Well, sure. I'd like to start, because this will be sort of a segue from what I previously was mentioning, and then we'll go into talking about world citizenship. But that's WSA's role. I mean, if I had to give a WSA mission statement, it would be that WSA was founded in 1954 to educate about, to promote, and to implement human rights, world citizenship, world law, and world citizen government. That is, to create the institutions and structures of law, like you could say a world court or a world court of human rights, that would allow us as human beings, as individuals, to come together peacefully to govern our world. Because right now the world is not being governed. The United Nations is not a government. In fact, their main brochure, if you ever visit the UN in New York, the first thing it says in the brochure, and I find this kind of funny, it says the United Nations is not a world government. That's the first thing it says in the brochure when you visit the Secretariat in New York. But we are claiming that world governmental status. World Service Authority is actually the administrative branch of the World Citizen Government, founded in 1953 by Gary Davis, after about 1 million people had registered, and that was really the basis for the creation of this government, as people around the world had registered as world citizens through a registry he created in Paris. In fact, not only did he get those almost 1 million people to register, but there were about 6 or 7 million postcards and letters of support that he got separate from people who hadn't even known that they could register at that point. So there was a big, overwhelming group of people after World War II, having lived through the devastation of World War II, who wanted something better for humanity. So World Service Authority's really purpose is to help us to understand who we are in this 21st century, and that is, of course, sentient being, human being, sovereign, whatever you want to call yourself, but at the highest level that we can claim ourselves. And so our goal is to, help to identify ourselves as world citizens, but also two, really, and this is maybe in the long run the most important thing, and that is to outlaw war. I mean, a lot of groups talk about abolishing war. Well, I don't know if war itself can ever really be abolished, because there will always be people who might want to take up weaponry, whether it's just their fist, even if guns are completely outlawed. It's still that could happen. And so it's a question of outlawing it, because how does law function perhaps at a local level? Well, law functions because it is enforceable. You have a system of justice where law is created either by the people saying we need some kind of law to cover a certain issue. They bring it to the people who are supposed to represent them in their parliament or Congress, and then those people draft a bill, it becomes a law, and then that law is enforced by like an executive, and then it's adjudicated by a judiciary or a court system. And so that seems to function pretty well at many local levels. And so what we're saying is just to take that same legal system and bring it to the higher level, bring it to the world, so that you'd have, for example, perhaps a world parliament, a world court of human rights, a world executive council, and that there would be a world peace or police force, and that it would be that peace or police force's duty to make sure that once war is actually outlawed, that if people are taking up arms or starting to fight, that they intervene to prevent it from becoming an all-out war. I mean, hopefully, obviously, people should be able to discuss their differences in a peaceful way and in different venues, and be able to do it maybe even with anger, and that's okay. Anger is an okay emotion as long as it doesn't lead to violence. So we would see like a world peace or police force being sort of a global ombuds people who could step in and intervene to prevent conflict from becoming armed conflict.
And so I guess the next question that would tie into that, someone may have noticed, what's the holdup? What's taking so long? Is it funding? Is it that the world isn't ready yet? Because I see a lot of those comments, and I personally have my opinion on it, which it is not really part of this conversation. I try and discuss that on my channel, but so and what's taken so long, and if war will become outlawed, and there are people that are actually committing crimes as of right now, because there are some principles in place or some laws in place and some statutes or whatever, then when are we going to see that new paradigm where it's not only enforced but also people are brought to justice?
Well, that's part of the role of registering people as world citizens. In a sense, World Service Authority, and even the World Citizen Government that was founded in 1953 and World Service Authority in 54, we are just planting the seeds now, because if we don't start now, it'll never happen, obviously, of a future for humanity where we can live together peacefully, where we can work out our differences in a court or in a parliament or in a venue where people can participate even online, because now that anyone with a mobile phone, even in a remote place on some remote mountainside, could participate in a global election or a global voting situation, or even dealing with understanding how things should function by getting knowledge and information remotely and mobily. So it is a question of planting those seeds of world citizenship, letting people know that first of all, we have a Universal Declaration of Human Rights that we provide multiple copies of it to people all over the world for free. Everyone who requests an application form for the World Passport gets a copy of this Declaration of Human Rights. Everyone who actually gets the documents gets it, and anyone who wants it, you can request. We even will offer it to people in bulk supplies. So it's this knowing that you have rights, knowing one of which is your right to choose your own political allegiance. And you have the right to identify yourself as a person before the law. That's Article 6. And Article 20, what is it? 21.3, well, the will of the people shall be the basis of the authority of government. We, the people, decide how we want to govern ourselves, and if we want to govern ourselves as world citizens, we can. So it's a question, I guess, a concern of us growing geometrically rather than exponentially. And that's been, I think, the difficulty over the past 60 years or so since the founding of this organization, in that we've added one person plus one person plus one person, rather than adding 1 plus 2 plus 4 plus 8 plus 16 plus 32 plus 64, etc. Right. So if we can be expanding and doubling, that would be what we really need to do to reach the whole world. And so we have not been successful in that. I think part of the issue is that people may not completely understand what is world citizenship. What does that mean? They might be even a little bit afraid of it, because they might think that means that they're losing somehow their individual sovereignty, or they're giving up somehow their national identification. Excuse me, I'm really sorry.
It's okay.
Wait, I'm sorry. Hello? Hi, I'm in the middle of a recorded Google call. Okay. Okay. Bye.
And that was that's okay. That was a question that I had for you also, is that, what is sovereignty, and what is the sovereignty that a world citizen has? I personally understand it as that we are still part of a government. We're still part of a constituency where, we are focused on rights, but we also have responsibilities towards the world, towards each other, towards oneself, and that the difference is that a sovereign individual may or may not abide by those moral inclinations that we have agreed to in our credo. So, and if you don't mind, just elaborate on that, what I just said, but also what you were just touching bases on about losing your sovereignty. I personally have not seen that at all in any of the writing, any of the literature, anything that I agreed upon, anything that's Gary has said, anything that you've said, anyone at the WSA, that
right.
by becoming a world citizen, I am becoming a slave once again.
Right.
I mean, that's kind of the mentality, it seems.
Well, people aren't taught about citizenship. They might be taught about citizenship in school, or maybe if they're join some scouting organization about what it means to be a quote-unquote good citizen, help your neighbor, help somebody across the street, or clean up the environment. But they don't talk about citizenship in what it necessarily means to have rights and responsibilities at a certain level. And so, of course, we come from the viewpoint that citizenship is like concentric circles. You take a little pebble and you drop it into a pond or a lake, a smooth water surface, and you'll see how the water around that pebble will expand in circles. Those are concentric circles. So first of all, you start as a citizen really of your family, because that's who protects you, that's who's around you, that's who feeds you and sustains you. Then you have a greater citizenship, which would be your local town or city, maybe your community of friends that you're a citizen of. And we can be sort of citizens, obviously, in these different groups at the same time, and there's nothing preventing you from being a citizen in one group from that of another. And then, of course, you're a citizen maybe of your larger community, your region, your hemisphere, if you want to say that, of the planet, of the solar system, of the galaxy, of the universe, and if there is such a thing, of the multiverse. And so we're trying to focus on world citizenship, and we call it world citizenship rather than Earth citizenship, because Earth would focus more on the environmental aspect and that, or ecological aspect, which is important. But we're talking more on a political level. So we're saying we first have to see ourselves as world citizens before we can move on to something higher and see maybe ourselves as universal citizens and have a universal passport. Well, anyway, in a sense, if for people who are into media and to things like Star Trek, they will see what we're trying to do is similar to what, if you ever watched the old Star Trek TV show from the 1960s, or even the more recent ones that were in the late 80s and early 90s, or even the most recent films, they have this viewpoint that human beings are already together on planet Earth. They're, in a sense, already as a functioning government on planet Earth. It's just when they go into outer space that they meet, and I wouldn't even call those people, or that they meet aliens. They're extraterrestrials. They're not on Earth. And so that's where they start having the difficulties, where the nation state sort of rears its ugly head, but out in space. So we're saying that we can live together peacefully. We can have, you could say, a federation here on planet Earth where we're working together. Just like you have here in America, it's nothing to be afraid of. You have a Montana, you have a Florida, you have an Illinois, and you don't see people generally, except for maybe the Civil War, picking up guns from, in Ohio and shooting people in Wisconsin or something. It doesn't generally happen unless there's some, something involved with, on a much lower level, with drugs or some kind of crime on a much lower level, where there are police to handle that. But there is, and you can call 911 for that, but there is no way to call 911 globally if there is a marauding army trying to take over. So our point is that with world citizenship, if we can see ourselves at that highest level, we don't have to give up any lower level allegiance. I mean, Gary Davis, who, and maybe this is why people think about this perhaps, did renounce his U.S. citizenship when he claimed, right before he claimed world citizenship. And the reason he claimed world citizenship was because he had no government, nothing to help him, as, in a sense, as a stateless person. I like to say that Gary Davis is not stateless, he is world full.
That's how I kind of see it too, yeah.
Yeah, and so I've sort of created a new word by calling him worldful, if you could say that, because he is full of the world is full of him. He understands the world. He's one with the world, and he knows he's part of that system. And being a world citizen, having world citizenship is sort of having that understanding of the world as one human family, one planet Earth. It's our only home. It's our parent. We must protect it if we want it to protect us. And so you don't have to give up anything like Gary did. In fact, Gary says, well, I did that so no one else would have to. As long as you raise your allegiance to that higher level, you don't have to give up anything lower. And we're not here to tear down or to take away from the nation-state system at all. We're offering an alternative. In fact, if you ever read or learn about Buckminster Fuller, he talked about how tools are what changed the world. I mean, I can pick up this pen here and show you this ink pen, and this is much better than having a quill like they do in Harry Potter, where they have to dip it in some ink and then the ink might spill and get everywhere. So whoever created this tool and used this space to say, wow, I can create a pen that holds the ink in it so it won't get all over my hands, it won't get all over my parchment, this is a much better tool, and everyone will flock to it, and they have, obviously. So we're saying we're trying to create right now a better tool, which is this global governmental system that's participatory, that involves all human beings, that will help us to live together peacefully. I mean, that will help us to all fulfill everyone's human needs, our basic needs at a lower level, all the way to the highest level of self-actualization.
I think, if you don't mind me interjecting, I think that part of the greed that happens in the world is because our current monetary system that's in place. If you don't mind, talk about a little bit of the mutual affluence system, so that way people could kind of see where we're going with this. And also, I think another aspect of the nation-state system that we currently have are institutions that basically, I personally think education, for example, I understand how we got here with education, because it was hoarded at some point through universities and small groups and esoteric circles, occult circles, that kind of thing. And then eventually they started making like a pay service, which what we kind of have now. They became universities, in other words, which are still currently in place. I personally think that they stifle creativity, which creativity and innovation are what led to changes such as that pen that you're holding, or what led to ideas such as, you know, let's go ahead and put a rover on Mars. So
sure.
What do you think? Maybe that's a little bit off topic, but as far as real changes, like the World Service Authority and the World Government of World Citizens, those are real changes in my view, and this is why I'm passionate about it. But
sure.
What do you see the role of world citizens, or world government, world citizens, and what kind of changes are we going to do? Can you speak of the different kinds of commissions, in other words?
Sure. Sure. Well, so first of all, you mentioned like the monetary system, and certainly, and I was even listening to a show on NPR this morning about the monetary system and how it's become sort of bankrupt, and it's become bankrupt because the people in charge of that system, who may be banks, perhaps, are the ones who are controlling it, and it's not functioning as it should in a free-flowing way and in a realistic way in comparison to how people are trying to live their lives, and so it's artificial. And even money like the dollar or the euro, whatever, is really just a confidence game. It's not based upon, like it was a long time ago, upon gold, or which even that is not necessarily the best thing to base a monetary system on, because after a nuclear holocaust, what can you do with gold? Not much. It'd be much better if it were based upon fresh water, or if it was based upon energy spent. So World Service Authority, over the years, we have talked about creating a world mutual abundance bank, creating world money like a mundo, and we even did create and have a sample of like a basic bill, like a world kilowatt bill, which represents, in a sense, energy. A kilowatt would be like energy spent. So, because when you get paid for something, it's because you either used mind energy or hand energy to do something, to create something, or to improve something, or change something for someone. You've done something to help them. And so there could be like just a barter system where you're just exchanging things, or it could be still some kind of bill or credit system where you've spent some energy and it's based upon that, which would be realistic. And so we are talking about but it's not. I would have to say it's not one of our main functional programs at this point, because we have probably 30 or 40 different programs that we have either in some degree started, or it's just at some for some of those programs it's just a good idea on paper and we haven't even instituted it. Some we instituted and they were functioning really well, and then we ran out of funding for them, and so those aren't functioning anymore. The money issue is certainly a crucial one, because it obviously does impact people day to day on a grand scale. I mean, if you happen to be born in a poor country and you're starving to death, what's the likelihood of you getting out of that cycle of poverty and desolation? It's pretty minimal at this point, and that's because obviously, like you mentioned earlier, there is some greed to it. There's some we versus they mentality. There's also the fact that governments are spending almost $1 trillion together to prepare for and wage war, and I'm glad I kept this little flyer out. I don't know how well you'll be able to see this in your camera, but this is called "What the World Wants,"
okay, yeah.
and how to get it. And as you can see, it maybe sort of looks kind of pixelated perhaps in your view, but you can find this online if you put "What the World Wants" and how to pay for it. You can Google it. Anyway, you can see that there's these other bigger boxes in the bottom corner, and basically what it's saying is, if instead of spending $1 trillion preparing for and waging wars every year, if we prepared for and waged peace, only a quarter of the full military budget that all governments, national governments, spend on a year would be enough to stop soil erosion, to bring about peaceful change, to educate people, like you were mentioning about universities, to educate people, to fulfill basic needs so that there's fresh water, so that, I mean, UNICEF says that there are about 20,000 children almost who die every single day. That's like an astronomical number that we can't even get our heads around necessarily unless you're living in a part of the world where you see that suffering on a day-to-day basis. And so we don't see it on our nightly news here in America, unfortunately, or even on CNN around the clock. You don't necessarily see it. So my point is that if we just spend even a quarter of that amount of money preparing for and waging peace, that we could have a much better world. And so yes, we do have, the World Citizen Government has about 20 or so different commissions that pertain to different human endeavors, whether it's the environment, whether it's art and music, art and culture, whether it is women's issues, whether it's education, whether it's children's rights issues, whatever it may be. We have different experts in the field, and we usually go to them when we have a specific question about an issue, like when we're sending out a press release that might pertain to something economic. We would contact our World Economics coordinator and ask for that person's suggestions or comments. And like I said, these are usually experts in the field, so that they're already off doing their own thing to change the world in their particular field, and they're really just advisors to us. And so we count on them to give us support and information when we need it, whether it's for Gary Davis's radio show that he has on Sunday nights as World Citizen Radio, whether it's for when we're, like I said, writing a press release, when Gary's writing his blog, when we're thinking about how we're going to maybe do something differently with regard to our legal services or the documentation that we issue, or just our educational services. Those commissions you can find on World Service Authority's website, which is, by the way, www.worldservice.org. That's World Service, which is spelled as one word in singular, .org. And also there's another link through worldgovernment.org also. You can find it there too.
Well great. We're covering a lot of different topics, which is very good. Now, as far as documentation, can you discuss the different documentation that we have available to us, and how to use them properly?
Sure.
I did read the book online for Passport to Freedom,
right.
A Guide to World Citizens. So I'm familiar with using it. That book exactly. And so if anyone is interested, check that out. But also, hear it from a legal guru here.
Okay, sure. Well, yeah, that's what a guru is. In fact, that's what I teach our interns. It's important to be a guru, because that means you're teaching. You have an ethical framework that you are not selfish, but you're trying to give to others, and that's
Absolutely.
What a guru is about. So a legal guru, I feel like it's really important that law be democratized. It's really important, because right now, like if you go to a typical lawyer, they might charge you, depending upon what city you're in, $300 or $400 an hour for their legal assistance, and so they try to keep their legal lingo and their legal documents to themselves and only share it with you once you've opened your wallet. And of course, that's not the point of our legal department. Our legal department is there to help you, help people with their human rights situation and help them to understand what their rights are. It's so crucial for us that people know what their rights are, because if you don't know your rights, you can't claim them. So it's really important that people are interested, they can request that book through our catalog on our website. But there are, just by starting to get WSA documents like the registering as a world citizen and getting the world citizen card and certificate, or getting the world passport, and there's a bigger version of it behind me, but here's the standard what it looks like. But getting these documents can help you to understand who you are, first and foremost, as a sentient being, as a human, and start to know that you have these rights and you can claim them wherever you are on planet Earth. And that's really, and I don't think I mentioned this yet, that's really why it's so important to see yourself as a world citizen, because as a national citizen, your output to what you can do to change the world really ends at the national border. Okay, maybe it's only in an election every 4 years or every 7 years, depending on your country, and that's not a very big change. But if you see yourself as a world citizen, there are no borders. The only borders are right here in our head. Everything else you can do, that you can travel freely on your own planet, you can express yourself wherever you are. You should be able to live where you want, work where you want on your own planet. And of course, certain parts of the world you can do that, like in America or now in Western Europe, because there is what used to be just different countries in Europe now, and then it became a European community. Now it is a European Union. They don't have a constitution yet, but they will probably soon. So, and we're just saying, bring that idea of union to the whole world, so that anyone born in Chicago could easily fly to Shanghai and set up their office or their home there or whatever. Obviously you're going to fulfill some local requirements so that you can live there more indigenously probably than you might in one place or the other, so that you can fit in basically to the new culture. But you should be able to do that, and there should be nothing stopping you. And so our point is that if everyone is fed and clothed and housed in the world and has their basic needs met, then we can rise to those higher level needs. And using these documents like the World Passport and other documents is going to start getting us there. I'm going to get back to the documents here in a minute, but let me just finish.
Sure. You're fine.
So if people have these basic needs met, then why not have a world where competition isn't bad, but if competition could be positive and success driven, but in a positive way, like so that every part of the world or every country, if you still want to call it a country, would sort of compete to be the best country, to have the best amenities, so that poor starving people from one part of the world won't be wanting to necessarily go to some other part of the world, because there won't be a poor starving country anymore. Everyone will be brought up, and we're not here to be a Robin Hood. We're saying that obviously there's some people way up, and there's obviously people way on the lowest rung, just starving, striving to survive, but almost starving to death. And we said there doesn't have to be that big a disparity. Once again, there's enough human and natural resources in the world if we use them as tools for living instead of weaponry, then we can have this kind of world which might seem idealistic or unrealistic. But if you told an astronaut, if you told an individual back in 1900 that there would be an astronaut who 69 years later would land on the moon, you'd laugh at them, because Kitty Hawk hadn't even taken off for 4 years, if it's 1900. So yesterday's utopia is really today's reality. And so what we say is that the real idealists are the nationalists, the people who think that the nation-state system can continue the way it is and be able to do so without us blowing up the whole world, or without us causing dramatic environmental devastation, meaning that we won't have a planet to live on anymore. So the reason why it's so important that we want people to understand who they are, and that they can begin to identify themselves, whether it's with the World Citizen Card, the World ID Card, the World Passport, World Political Asylum Card if they're suffering from some persecution, and other documents, is so that we can start to see how we can fit into this world that would be based upon law and legal institutions that you and I, that we all participate in creating. And so that when you could have people who are now in Zimbabwe, which might be considered like a poor sort of starving country, they wouldn't be wanting to go to Florida other than maybe going to Disney World, because their life in Zimbabwe would be great. They would have all the fresh water that they need. They would have housing and education and jobs, and people would be happy to be there. I mean, most people up until really the last 30 or 40 years, most people really only at most maybe went 50 to 100 miles from their home in their whole life. Most people didn't travel internationally or couldn't, because it wasn't really till the late 40s with modern airplane technology that people could even go to other parts of the world easily. So this is in every aspect of human life. Let me put it this way: in every aspect of human life, we are global. Whether you're talking about technology, like the fact that you can be in another part of the world and talking to me here while I'm in Washington, D.C. instantaneously, and anyone in any part of the world could be watching this right now. That's incredible. I remember as a kid watching TV shows where they had something just like this, where it would be a telephone, but it was on a big screen, like a TV telephone. And so for me to see this reality in my lifetime, I think that alone is pretty amazing. So we can have this kind of world that we want, where people will have what they need, and it's just a question of changing our priorities, of understanding. And so also, whether it's technology, whether it's the environment, and we know that if there's a hole in the ozone, that could affect us anywhere on the planet, whether it's even with language now, with translation software, even our languages aren't keeping us apart. We're really one world. It's just in politics that for some reason we turn around to do a 180-degree turn to the horse and buggy era of the 17 and 1800s, where the nation state at that point was maybe useful because it was bringing smaller tribes together so they wouldn't fight each other. But what we're saying is right now, the nation state, because of the disparity in power, where some nine nation-state rulers or leaders have nuclear weaponry, and the others don't, that could lead to total global destruction. And that power disparity is a problem, obviously. And so we want to see that everyone can work and live together on this planet peacefully and see the world as one, because in every other aspect other than political, we already do. We take that for granted. So there's some kind of disconnect there between how we work just on a day-to-day basis and how we work politically. And so we're trying to change that through this world citizen government. And by issuing these documents, and getting back to the last question, is that by providing these documents, we're helping people to see that in their mind that that's really who they are. Gary Davis tells a story, for example, about how he went into this refugee camp once, and he found this man who was sort of sitting there in the corner, sort of catatonic, sort of going like that, and the other people in this refugee camp, was almost like a prison, were saying, oh, we haven't been able to speak to him for a couple years now. He's been sort of off on his own in his own reality. And so Gary gets angry about these things and upset, and he's like, well, this is ridiculous. He probably just has been rejected. He thinks he's not even being treated as a human anymore. So Gary created a world passport with this person's photo and his name in it. He opened up the passport and handed it to the person in the man's hands. The man looked down at the passport, saw his picture, saw his name, and he came out of his sort of catatonic, almost coma-like state because he realized, well, I really exist, And so these documents really, they are anti-documents in a sense. The world passport is an anti-passport. The point is, as sovereign or sentient beings, whatever, we don't need a document to say that I have the right to travel. We have that already just by being born human beings innately and inalienably. One person who was in our office like 7 or 8 months ago said to me, David, people ask me where I live. And he said, David, what do you think my answer is? I'm like, well, on planet Earth. And he's like, well, that's true, but he said, I live in my body.
Right.
So some people ask me, where were you born? And I say planet Earth, and then they laugh because they know it's true, but that's not exactly what they were expecting to hear. So these documents are the start, really, of this whole process of bringing people together onto our planet. Because if they can see themselves first as world citizens, then hopefully they can discuss all those lower-level issues. All those lower-level issues, whatever it may be, economically or whatever that are affecting the planet, will not matter once again if there's total omnicide, which is total global destruction, either because we create it through the environment, whatever causes it.
And if I may interject, you made a point that I think is creates a chasm for people. And I understand what you said clearly, but others are not able to bridge that concept. What you said is these are anti-documents. We are sentient. We're sovereign. We actually don't even need these to be able to travel wherever. Now, that's exactly what some people are saying. That's actually either causing them to go away from world citizenship or not even come close to it, which is, well, no one can tell me what to do. It's my life. It's my body. It's my that kind of thing. So, and what my response to that is, the way I understand, or my limited interpretation of all of this is that, well, who is going to protect your right? Who is going to back you? Well, I mean, we're living in a paper game. The paper game and the legal infrastructure that we have going on is that I believe that the world government of world citizens through the WSA has my back. So
sure, of course.
That's the major difference between someone that says, well, I'm sovereign, and that sovereignty is written in the Constitution or it's written in state law, but that's what I think people are failing to see, that chasm, which is, well, who's going to ensure that right, especially if you're living in a so-called oppressive system or oppressive government or nation-state system.
Right. Well, only you can know your rights. Only you can claim your rights for yourself. No one has to do it for you. No one necessarily even maybe want to do that for you. But yes, we are here as an organization to help back up everyone, all of humanity, and certainly all the people who are falling through the cracks in that nation-state system. We're here to try to catch them. That's true, but I understand the other point of it, that people say, well, you know, why should you ID me? That's just another ID. You know, why? And so what we say to those people is, by all means, if you want to ID yourself, if you want to create your own passport that has your name on it, you know, the John Johnson passport or whatever it is, whatever your name, you know, a person's name might be, you can create that, and that's legitimate in that you have already recognized it. And if you can get a family or friend to recognize it, if you can get a bank or even a state or whoever to recognize it for some contract or for travel, well, that's great. But the reason why people come to World Service Authority is because we've been doing this since 1954. And so there is a track record of recognition. It's not always, especially lately, always easy, and we don't want people to have an unrealistic view that they can go wherever they want, whenever they want, just by presenting a world passport, even though that's your human right to do so. That's a fundamental human right, but that right is not being respected by the nation-state system. And so whether with the world passport or with your own document that you create, your ability to go where you want to on your own planet and do what you want to do is being restricted. It's partly being restricted out of logic because you need help from other people. Unless you could live on your own self-sustaining farm or something where you didn't need anybody else, well then by all means go ahead and do that, but not everybody has that opportunity or even has the skills to do that. So we need other people, and because we need other people, we're involved with other people, and that means by being involved with other people, we have to sort of, at least to a small degree, understand that we're going to have to relegate some of our sovereignty to either others or to machines, in a sense, to regulate our life. And what do I mean by machines? Just a classic example of this is the stoplight at the street corner. If you're driving a car, riding on a bike, or even walking across the street in a four-way intersection, there's a stoplight there to make it safe. And so why did we create it? So that there wouldn't be people, whether it's cars and bikes or people in bikes or whoever, bumping into each other. So we have, in a sense, delegated some of our sovereignty to the government of that intersection, which is that stoplight. And as long as the stoplight is fair, you've got red on one and green on the other, and then it switches. If it didn't switch, that wouldn't be fair, obviously. If it's always green for one set of people to go through, then that's not a good government, and then it needs to be fixed or changed or corrected. But as long as it's fair, well, then we appreciate that government. In fact, we don't even care who made that stoplight. We don't even care that it's red that tells us to stop or green that tells us to go, as long as we know what the rule is. In fact, I like to say that there already are global governmental systems that are functioning, whether it's that stoplight, whether it's the Universal Postal Union. As long as you get your letter to your Aunt Millie, you know, in Minnesota or whatever, you don't care who is the Secretary General of the Universal Postal Union, as long as you paid your 49 cents or whatever, and she's gotten her letter. You expressed your right to freedom of expression by writing her that thank you note or that holiday card or whatever you've sent. So just in a sense, I like to say, it's kind of, I say this as a joke, but it's really true. Service is our middle name. I mean, we are called World Service Authority, so service is our middle name. But that's the point, is any good government, and I don't mean good, I mean good meaning functioning properly and effective for people. But I also mean ethically good, too.
Ethically, yeah.
Ethically also. It should be a service to people. It shouldn't be there to hinder people. That's not the point of it. The point is that, well, one, the government is already you. Every human being on this planet is a world government in microcosm. People just don't know it yet. Maybe they don't want to accept that, because that's a big responsibility. Being effective and good and ethical is a big responsibility, and that's not always easy for everybody, because maybe not everybody's had the kind of education or training to understand how to be that way. And so that's obviously one of our roles when we have a credo of a world citizen and a pledge of a world citizen. There are things in there that maybe every major religion in the world would have stated in a religious way. We state in a non-denominational way, which is, in a sense, like do unto others as you have them do unto you, or you're your sibling's keeper, so to speak. I mean, we're all children of you could say God, or of the universe, and so we're all part of this one thing. We just don't realize it, and that's these documents. Everything really are meaningless, just like any other document is meaningless unless we imbue it with meaning. And the meaning behind this, unlike the national passport is there to separate. Its point is to say, hi, I'm here and I'm better than you, so let me in, or I've got money, so let me in, or whatever. Whereas the world passport is to say, we are one, we are together, let's live. And what I love to say is that I mean, if I had to put it in one small phrase, World Service Authority, the World Citizen Government, World Citizenship is about living and loving for humanity and the earth. I mean, if I had to put it in that phrase. My longer phrase, if I whenever I have more time, I say, why should someone have to fight and die for a country when they can live and love for humanity? That's really the underlying principle behind everything we're trying to do, is love thy neighbor, love each other, work together to make a better world. And that's not going to be easy. I'm not, I don't have rainbow glasses on here. I know it's not going to be easy. And this is why we want to bring people together, because, 7 billion heads are better than one. We can come together. There's, the fact is that there's now about 200 different countries, and you've got your own technological and scientific and military departments of each of those separate governments who are oftentimes at odds with each other and not working to create the next best mapping of the brain, like President Obama was just talking about, but they're working against each other to maybe find the next best weapon to destroy their enemy. And so, the biggest enemy of humanity really is lawlessness, is lack of the structures that help us as human beings to come together in a peaceful way. So it's based upon law. I mean, and nobody wants to have law that tells them how they should run their daily lives. No one wants to have government. I mean, if you could, walk around and do whatever you want on a day-to-day basis like you're on your own desert island, well, that would be great. But like I said a little bit earlier in the call, we do live with each other. We do live with other people. So this is why we set rules. I mean, like if you've ever been to a swimming pool, the first thing you see on the fence is no glass objects in the pool, or no electronics plugged in, or whatever it might be. And these are safety issues. These are concerns that any kind of government would have for the people or the community using that particular facility, whatever it might be. And so automatically we have sort of a social contract that you and I and every human being have sort of forcibly been put into, because even as a baby, you without either your mother's milk or a bottle of milk being given to you, you can't survive. I mean, we are born in a way that we require other humans, others of our species, to help us to survive. And
well, I like to say that at the core of our human nature, we manipulate just so that we can assimilate. So
sure.
and because we have that, we have to use proper intent, then that the only way past this chaotic world that we're living in is to become world citizens, just like Gary's been saying for 60+ years, and allow us to evolve once again. Because we have an opportunity to, as individual world citizens, as people, to come together, communicate with the internet, and say, hey, so there's a problem going on locally. What do you think we should do to solve it? We can teach each other things freely, and So that's one of my hopes, is that the internet will get out to as many people as possible, as soon as possible, because that communication is power. It really is. It's the ability to have this new paradigm shift. And so
that reminds me real quick. I know you may have another thought coming, but there was an author named Douglas Adams who wrote The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. I don't know if you've ever read that. On the back of the book, inside the book, it says, "Don't panic." That's like the big phrase that it says to never do, is to don't panic. You know, things will happen as they should in the world. And he talked about a paradigm shift like this, how there was sort of the revolution of sand, how people have used sand originally to create a telescope to look out in the world and see how we existed in the universe. Then they used sand to create glass, to create a microscope, to look at the miniature part of the world and see inside ourselves biologically. Then they used sand to create a silicon chip. Okay, and what that did was allow us to start communicating like we're doing now. But it was more like maybe one to many, perhaps you could say. But then sand has been used to create fiber optics, which now allows for high-speed internet connections, which allows not only one to speak to many, but many to speak to many, and many to speak to one. So it's amazing how this revolution, just by the idea of sand, has evolved. And so certainly the idea of world citizenship, world government is a paradigm shift from the nation-state system. And as you know, in any paradigm shift, it's sort of what Schopenhauer, the German philosopher, said: truth passes through three phases. First, it's ridiculed. Second, it's violently opposed. And third, it's accepted as self-evident. Okay, so the idea of world citizenship, and even the idea of a fully functioning global governmental system, is passing through those three phases: being ridiculed by people who think it's never possible or feasible or don't want it or are afraid of it; being violently opposed by the nation-state system that's, you know, preparing for and waging wars every day. And so we haven't gotten to that self-evident truth that's right here before our noses, which is that we are one human family. We do only have one planet, at least right now, since we haven't very easily gotten off of it. And we need to work together if we want a kind of world now. You know, in the future, we need to start working now to have that kind of world that we want. So we don't need to panic, as Douglas Adams would say in his book. And I would say Gary Davis had two main gurus in his life. He had a guru,
Nataraja.
Guru Nataraja, who Gary would go to in times of really deep thought and deep frustration, and another guru named Harry Jacobson. And so Guru Nataraja said to Gary, you know, because he knew what Gary had gone through in the war and how devastated he was for having lost his brother's life, and why he really needed to get out of that world war system and, you know, start world peace one, you could say. And he understood the kind of weight on Gary's shoulders, also being known as, you know, quote-unquote first world citizen, and having the weight of the world on him to try to change the world, and it's not easy being that person. He could have gone off and done nothing more with his life, but because of this heavy weight. But the guru was like, Gary, you know, we're a small speck of dust in the universe. Whether you do something or whether you don't do something, it doesn't matter. You know, the universe is going to keep going on without you. So you don't have to do anything. That was his first guru. His second guru, Harry, is like, well, Gary, if you want to make a change in this world, sort of like, you know, what Gandhi or Martin Luther King might say, you have to be that change. You have to make that happen. You have to do something. So if you want to be a world citizen, claim it. Say, I am a world citizen. Here's my document that proves it. And so we work from both viewpoints. So it's sort of a geodiametric opposite of doing nothing and doing something. You know, and obviously and there's a pole back and forth, like if I had an invisible rubber band here. And so we try to be the center of that rubber band, in a sense, seeing on both sides the doing nothing and doing something, and trying to figure out, well, how can we transcend that geodiametric opposite and do something while doing nothing, if that makes sense. When in a sense is, we want to be the sort of the seamless service behind what's going on with the world to make the world come together, so that you don't have to see what's happening. You don't have to see what's all the doing, but that we want people to be able to participate and be involved in that as much as they want or as little as they want, according to their needs, according to their skills. And so it is creating a world of doing as well, and maybe creating a world where, I mean, there's some people, there's a guy named Jacques Fresco who talks about, and maybe you've heard of him, who talks about having a world where, like, we put all of our drudgery and the work and give machines to do that, so we can have an aesthetic life where we can paint and draw and sing and enjoy the skills.
I think Isaac Asimov said something similar, yeah.
Right, and skills of being a human being. I mean, it would be amazing to have a world like that, but we first have to give up our penchant for killing, really. We have to give up our penchant for producing big weaponry, and we have to give up not really give up, but change the we versus they mentality. I'm not really saying give it up, because maybe humans can never give that up. I mean, we have a tendency towards being perhaps selfish, but to redirect that selfishness or that greed or that power in other ways, so that we can live together peacefully. I mean, that's the kind of world that I want for my family, my children, our future. But we have to see it happening now. So it's always a sort of a struggle between the doing and not doing, or how much do we do without impinging upon someone else's rights or responsibilities. So it's a fine line, and it's not always easy. And this is why we want to bring in as many people as possible who have skills and expertise in governing already, or who want to share their skills and expertise in maybe some completely other field, whether it's architecture or science, whatever it might be, into creating a scientifically functioning governmental system. And that's actually why we have a project called our World's Integrity Project, which was launched in 1993. I won't spend much time talking about it, but it went on for about 5 years. It was great. It was to ask the basic question, how can we as sovereign world citizens govern our world? And so that's still a question that's important. We sort of ran out of funding for that project because we were giving money to groups in Kombolcha, Ethiopia, to have these meetings, these 3-day meetings where 30 or so people would get together, discuss these questions, and then share their ideas with
known as infosets.
Yeah, infosets, exactly, in Australia or whatever. And there's a guy named David Beatty who's working on this. He's in the Netherlands working on this to reinvigorate this whole process. And now with the internet and this kind of communication that we're having here right now, we can much more easily do this. Even, like I said, even someone in a remote village, if they have a cell phone that has some kind of internet capability, they can even participate in what's called a Globoset, which would be an online infoset, rather than having to do it even in person. And so we can govern our world. We just have been politically choosing not to. And it's really crucial that we understand that the powers that we have as human beings are numerous, and we're just not making use of all of them yet, and it's a shame, because and it's frustrating to us to see the sort of slow progress. But that's what I love about Gary Davis, having worked with him for almost 22 years now. He's so optimistic about everything on a day-to-day basis, whether you hear it in his radio show and his vigor, even at almost 92 years old, in what he says. And so, of course, that enthusiasm has rubbed off on me, as I guess you can tell. I love talking about the work that we do here. I love explaining to people what it is, even if there's an argument about it. And there's a lot of, we're not here to convince people, really. We're here to say, well, this is another option. If you like it, promote it, support it. I mean, most of the work World Service Authority has done, and I have to say maybe this has been one of our biggest concerns, is that it's been by word of mouth. We do not advertise. We don't really have an advertising budget or really a fully fledged PR department. And I think that's been part of the difficulty, is getting the word out there to people. And thank you for doing this today, because this will hopefully raise awareness.
Oh, thank you. That's not a problem.
Thousands of other people, or hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people, could see this at any time, and that could really raise awareness of what we're trying to do.
Absolutely.
And
I'd like to give you the final word. First of all, I'd like to make a mention to a festival that Gary made me know of, which is the Universal Rights Festival. Go to the website, universalrights.org, and there's a brochure there, pamphlet. And it will be December 10th, 2013. If you can make it or support it in any kind of way, it'd be greatly appreciated. And it's honoring Gary, all his work, but also the UDHR, which is basically our living document that we cherish. All human beings should cherish it and check it out. If you don't know it, you should know it inside and out. Also, really quick, you can contact the World Service Authority by mailing World Office, 5 Thomas Circle, Northwest, Washington, D.C., 20005. The telephone number is 202-638-2662. The fax is 202-638-0638. And you can also email them at info@worldservice.org, or just visit the website worldservice.org. I've worked with them several times, numerous times before I became a world citizen. They're really good people to talk to, and they'll let you know how it is. And really quick, I want to thank you for the opportunity to talk. It's been a privilege of mine. You answered a lot of my questions, and I'm sure hopefully you may have answered a lot of questions that are lingering in the minds of the viewers. But here's with you with your final word here.
Right. Well, Barbara, I'd like to say thank you so much for this wonderful opportunity. Whenever we have the chance to speak to the global public, in a sense, directly, which is really what you and I are doing here. We're speaking to anyone who's a part of this humanity who wants to hear us. And that's the power of the internet. That's the power of the world that we live in now. We know already, I mean, that the world is one. I mean, in a sense, we are lucky, really lucky, to be living in this day and age. Maybe we don't appreciate it as much. I mean, I like to talk about sort of the old joke about how Christopher Columbus, when he was setting sail, thought he might fall off the edge of the planet because they didn't know whether the planet was a sphere or was a cube or something else. And so, in a sense, as world citizens, we know, of course, already that the world is one. We're like the astronauts, in a sense, who've seen the world as one from outer space. And once we put that first space station out there, or satellite out there, and once we shot off that first astronaut into space, and we could look back and pretty much see almost the whole Earth, or maybe 2/3 of it from outer space, we definitely knew that it is one. We can't deny that anymore. And so, like I said, our main purpose here is to let people be aware of that oneness, to cherish it, to know that what we have, we may not be alone in the universe, but until we find others, we should cherish what we have and protect what we have, because it would take so much energy. We don't have yet the capacity, intellectually or whatever, to create, to get away from this planet, to put the human species somewhere else. And I think once we do, we will have to have resolved our differences here on the planet first to be able to get to that stage, to be able to work together to reach out to the universe. And maybe that's why the universe hasn't reached out to us yet, because they say, well, how can we deal with those creatures if they're fighting amongst themselves? I mean, it is unusual how humans are one of the only few creatures that kill its own species for no good reason. So once again, I mean, and I said it before, we're here to help people who need our help. Anyone who wants our help, please contact us if we can. If there's some kind of human rights issue that you're facing, please contact the organization, whether it's a documentation issue that you're facing, and we are here, we're founded obviously partly to document the undocumented. We're here to help with that. We're here, once again, if you need someone like Gary Davis or myself to speak on a human rights or world citizenship issue, or if you need, like we said, multiple copies of the Declaration of Human Rights, we're happy to provide it. We're coming up on that, as Robert just said, on the 65th anniversary of that declaration. We want to celebrate that in a big way with this big rock concert out in Griffith Park in LA, and with other events. So please definitely feel free to contact us at any time. And I do apologize ahead of time if we are overwhelmed at some times. We are a small staff, and we act as a nonprofit, and so we have limited funding, which means if there's a big influx of requests, we may be slow. So if you don't get an email immediately, don't worry, you will get an email, you will get a reply from us. It may take a few days, a few hours, etc., for us to reply, but we are here to help. And if you just have any kind of question, whatever it is, I mean, I felt, no matter what, as a service organization, people would sometimes call us. This was pre-internet usually. They would call and ask a question like, "Oh, how do I find the particular embassy of this country?" And I'm like, "Well, that really has nothing." In my mind, I'm thinking that really has nothing to do with us. But I went, because we had a little booklet which listed all the embassies and their phone numbers, and I would give the person the phone number over the phone, because I'm thinking, well, they've just been helped by us. That's goodwill. They've been we provided them a service, even if it wasn't what we normally do. It doesn't matter. We're here to be a service to the public, to humanity, and to let you know, even more crucially than what I just said, is that you already are part of this service. You are already a world citizen, whether you know it or not, whether you're like it or not, through the principles of jus soli and jus sanguinis. And maybe I'll end on this point. We are all world citizens. Jus soli meaning the right of the earth, jus sanguinis meaning the right of the blood. And that's generally how any citizenship is understood. If you're born in a place, not all countries do it this way, but America does. If you're born in that place, then you have that citizenship. Well, we're all born on planet Earth, so we must be citizens of the planet. And we're all born of human parents. So that's the right of the blood. We're all human beings. We're all world citizens already. And so it's just a question of taking that status, running with it, saying, well, you know, I can link up with my other fellow world citizens all around the world and do it in a peaceful and delightful way. Because our point, once again, is to help people to understand that if we're going to have a world where we can celebrate and respect our differences, it has to be one where we can move beyond them. And that's really what world citizenship is about, is protecting our lower level allegiances by moving beyond them to understand that we're more than just, you know, Ghanaian or Chinese or Canadian or French or American or whatever. We are human beings first and foremost.
Absolutely. And on that note, we'll end the broadcast here. I appreciate it very much once again. Please consider doing it once again with me. We can talk about other topics like integrity or how culture, the attributes that culture may be affected by law, because that's an important point, I think. And if you all have any questions, please feel free to chime in. Otherwise, I hope this helps. Take care.
Thanks, Vibro.
You're welcome. Have a good one.
You too.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.